Now, the following is a series of weird things that happened to me that I truly can't explain. Now, what annoys me most about this is that I've tried to tell people my experience and they kind of just laugh it off. Actually, I told one of my colleagues at work today. I work as a Forest Server fire patrol person, but when I told them my story, they kind of just laughed at me and said, "Oh yeah, is that really what happened?" And that really annoys me. And this is supposed to be someone that's quite similar and that I'd actually consider a friend there, and also had weird experiences before, so I just don't get it. People are so eager to hear what you say, but then they're so happy and quick to dismiss everything. I just don't get it. But let's dive into my story and hopefully at least a few of you will understand. Now, emotionally, I wasn't really the same after this. I don't know why. I'm not a spiritual person and I don't really believe in religion much, but this kind of made me think about what else is really out there. Where I live, there can be lots of snow all the time, but I love to go on my little adventures, and there was a forest that was supposedly haunted near where I lived. Now, I'd heard quite a few things about this place, and apparently you'll hear screams in the night, you'll see headless people wandering around, and I guess just the works really. Now, I'd actually been here on 2 occasions before. One was when I drove out with one of my friends, but to be honest, it was just the biggest waste of time. I mean, literally nothing happened. We were driving for a long time to get there, and basically nothing happened and we just get bored and come back. So I wasn't expecting too much in the second time that I'd been there. Again, nothing had happened, but in more recent times, I'd moved much closer and thought, why not go? Also, there was quite a nice snowfall, so I thought this was pretty cool. I really like going on adventures at night time like this, especially when the elements are involved. For whatever reason, it kind of makes me feel almost like I'm in a movie, especially if I've got my AirPods with me and I just listen to songs, and it really creates a vibe. I always found it empowering, but yeah. So I set out at night and I walked towards the forest off of the main path, and it's really dark. The stars are looking absolutely beautiful above me, and luckily there's no cars coming, so I just get off and straight into where the forest starts. There was probably about 30 meters of snow or whatnot before it actually starts. Then you're hit by lots of trees. Now I turn my flashlight on and suddenly I can see really well. I had a really powerful one that was actually adapted for cameras and stuff. I was actually joking with one of my friends, it's like turning on the daytime and there's nothing to be scared of. And I also said that this probably scares away the spirits more than anything. They probably think it's God. I think of these jokes as I can see my breath in front of me from the cold. Now, it's kind of like the snow that's fallen quite quickly to the ground, almost like it's kind of sleet, but it's not. It's still snowing. I notice it as I take my first steps into the forest. I have some pretty skinny trees on either side of me when I see something that looks odd. I can see what appears to be a white silhouette to my left when suddenly it vanishes. I'm a little confused by this, but suddenly I realise that it must be my breath from where I've got my scarf and things. I think it's a little odd and I tell myself just relax a bit, and I keep walking. The trees are kind of like overarching here and it actually looks really beautiful. I do notice one odd thing. There seems to be footprints that lead off from the main trail, but they kind of look like hoof shapes. I thought maybe some kind of animal went through here, or God knows what. It couldn't have been horse riding because the branches are actually too low. To give you an idea, they're probably about 8 feet above me or dropping down to 5, so you'd have to duck sometimes. Now these aren't nice branches too. They're the kinds that come snagged on each other, and if you make one loose, it's going to kind of whip you in the face. And I didn't want to lose my eyes. But it wasn't too much of an issue really. So when I set off, I didn't really have a direction or place that I wanted to go to. I heard there was an old church that used to be here, and I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool if I can find that. Who knows what would happen if I go there on my own. Now at the time I was certain no other people around because I literally can't hear anything or see anyone. A really good telling sign is the fact that there's no lights. You kind of need lights to see where you're going out here, but I literally couldn't see any. Every so often, I look off into the woods and I don't see anything. I did notice one or two strange sounds, but they didn't happen too frequently. I know that there's lots of animals out here because of my normal line of work, and just I guess from having some good sense about my surroundings, so I didn't let it put me off. I knew I had to be careful of certain animals out here because I guess some could hunt at night, but I was going to be far bigger and they wouldn't dare go to me. The sky almost looks like a beautiful orangey colour above me because of my torch, and I think that's really pretty. I do start to feel the cold a bit now, so decide to pick up the pace. Another interesting thing is there's lots and lots of footprints on this path which have been here earlier, and I think that's a little bit bizarre because usually people don't hum here too often. I'm very used to going out here and there's no one around, so that was interesting. As I'm walking, the snow's now going directly into my face and it actually made it a bit annoying, to be honest. I stop for a moment to try and figure out the direction of it so I can try and avoid it when I hear a howling off. Now I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there seems to be another little trail where you can cut through going off of the main path, but I decide not to follow it just in case. I was kind of expecting to run into some crazy dog walker or something, but they never showed up, so I think this is a little bit odd. Eventually I come up to one of the trail signs and I can see some of the wildlife that lives here, and I think to myself, well, there's definitely nothing that's going to hunt me, as it's just birds and things like that. But I do wonder what the sound is that I heard. Now, I go a little bit further along and eventually the snow picks up even more now. It felt a little bit different and almost like the weather had become more hostile now. Again, I'm not a spiritual person, but it almost started to feel a bit more like the air was different here. Now, the only way I can describe what I was seeing if you haven't been in the woods at night in the snow is everything sort of looks like an infinite dream. It's almost like somebody's made an unlimited map of just forest, snow, woods, and it's just going to keep on going forever. You do have to be careful out here though, because if you really go off the path, then you don't want to be stuck out in the cold like this. As you can imagine, trying to get a fire going is not easy at the best of times, let alone here. As I'm thinking of this, I hear sounds up above again. I can hear somebody scurrying through the tree line. Well, at least that's what I think it is. And I pause for a second, and I go to switch my flashlight with one that has more of a focus beam. And I kid you not, as this is happening, I can see what appears to be a really small kind of lanky armed person scurrying through the woods. And I take a moment to figure out what this is. I quickly flicker on my other light, which is more powerful, and I don't see anything, so I just put it down to my mind going a little bit loose. I do have to say, I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is really weird. Annoyingly, my eyes didn't adjust well enough in the darkness to actually see this thing, and I have tried telling this part to some other people, but again, they all just say, oh yeah, it's just a rabbit. But I mean, come on, I've seen rabbits, and this thing had lanky arms. I can only describe it as if a person was about 3 feet tall, had a very large torso, and very long skinny arms that dragged the floor. But I don't know where they've gone. I tried looking around for more footprints, but I can't see anything, and this gives me a little bit of adrenaline to pick up the pace. I knew I'd gone out here hoping to find some ghosts and things, but now I wasn't so sure if I actually wanted to find them or not. Now again, I can see a mist form just in front of me, then slowly disappear again. It was a white mist, and it's really like somebody's just breathed in front of me and then vanished. I try and replicate how I was standing a few moments ago and pace backwards and start breathing more heavily to see if it was me, but there's nothing there. Pretty confused at this point, but I decided to just pick up the pace more. Now, I had one other scary experience before from being out in the woods I can think of now, but this was more to do with an animal than anything supernatural. I remember I'd gone somewhere and a big old moose appeared and it was extremely close to me. For whatever reason, it didn't really take notice of me, it just looked at me for a second, but I remember that scared me. But that feeling that I had was kind of beginning to loom over me, and I started to wonder if maybe there was a large animal like that around. Now this is when I noticed the first strange structure. It's something that I hadn't realised before. It's a large wooden structure that looks like 3 trees, kind of in a Stonehenge shape, but a little bit less spread out. This is really weird. It's like they've been carved by hand and placed upright. And what was really bizarre is that there isn't much snow in the middle. It seems like the ground is staying particularly dry here, and not snow forming. Now, I think this is really bizarre because, well, where I am there shouldn't be anything like this. I would have been aware of it too, and I don't understand why I'd never noticed it before. It now becomes apparent that I'm not actually on the main path. I switch off my flashlight once more, and I just take a few seconds to take in everything. I'm trying to give my eyes some time to adjust to the darkness, and I look down at my battery. It's dropped down to 40% on the main flashlight thing, and that's a bit of a worry. Batteries drain pretty quick in the cold, and now I notice that there's more of the mist forming up ahead of me. I actually take a second just to assess what this actually is, but I can't figure out what it is. It's almost like a group of people standing there, kind of just like breathing or talking normally, but there's no one around, and it only seems to be spawning in a specific spot. Now, I once more get closer and try and figure out what this is, but I just can't. Now, it reminds me of a story of what one of my other Fire Ranger friends had told me about. Sorry to go off topic, but I think it's important because it might have been linked to what I saw. Now, one of my good friends had been working in the service for quite a number of years, and he would always try and prank us and pretend there was scary things out there. We never believed him, and sometimes he would actually get us with Halloween masks and stuff, and that was pretty creepy. But I remember one day that he come up to us and he looked very freaked out. He said, "Guys, I saw something and I don't know what it is." We ask him to elaborate, and he refuses for a while, but because I'm good friends with him, eventually he decides to tell me what he saw. Apparently, he thought he saw a fire, so he went over to investigate it. Apparently it was just a small red cherry glow, but that could be the start of something. Just as he got to where it was, it suddenly went out, and there was a very big mist that appeared, which is like a smoky white colour. It almost looked like there was a huge fire in terms of the amount of smoke, but nothing was burning. He said it stayed here for literally 3 or 4 minutes as he stared at this bewildered, until eventually it just vanishes. Now, the reason that I'm telling you this is because it was incredibly similar to what I saw in terms of how he described it, the way that it moved, the slight opaqueness of it, everything was just weird. I stood there for what must have been about a good 4 minutes before eventually I decided that, yeah, I'm probably going to have to press through this now. I couldn't be waiting around here all day, and I decided to be brave and walk through it. I actually held my breath just before I did so because I didn't know if it was maybe some kind of dangerous chemical or something that had leaked out, but there wasn't anything. I eventually make it through after what felt like ages, to be honest, and I was actually gasping for breath. It probably took me a good 20 seconds to get through this. Eventually when I do, I turn around to try and figure out where it had gone, and I can't see it. I do think that I can see something just moving off into the distance, but I can't be sure. It was almost like a group of people had vanished, but one of them had just went off into the woods. Now, I'm a little bit freaked out, but again, I was here alone, so there's not really too much I can think of this. Now, I do notice something else very weird. There seems to be lots of really bizarre shaped footprints going off in different directions. They're all kind of like the hoof shaped, like the thing I'd seen earlier, but they're really far spread apart, like something quite tall had been walking. But it's walking as though that it's in complete arrogance to the trees that are there, like they don't exist. And again, I don't know what kind of animal could have done this. Now I walk on. I haven't really got a direction this time. I just know that I need to keep going. I have a feeling that I'm in a bad spot, and that's when I see something. This time I was certain that I was seeing something that was actually there. It was very far away, but I can only describe this as something which is completely black, with these white tusk arm things that was about 4 feet tall that hops around. I only saw this for a couple of seconds and it vanishes, but it's probably the scariest part of the encounter for me. I don't want to describe it as like a demonic thing because again I'm not spiritual, but I don't really know what this was. It's like a really weird creature that would stand awkwardly and almost like it was just bent out too far and shouldn't be balanced, but it was. I flash on both the lights at the same time searching for it, but again I don't see anything. I then realise that I'm not too far from a lake that I'm actually familiar with, and that's when I noticed a strange glow coming from the other side of it. Now, it was kind of like a glow of like a power plant would give, I guess, in the horizon. Almost like heat waves of light just emanating out slowly, again in the white colour, but almost having more of an energy to it. I decide that I have to investigate. Now, I was actually stupidly close to the shoreline now, because one slip, one twisted ankle and I could go through the ice and no one would get me here. I'd die of hypothermia before rescuers could find me, but the sense of adventure had taken over. I turn my light around again, and I can't see anything. For a second, I'm sure I can make out the faint glow of 2 eyes, but I don't know if this is just an animal, so I'm not too worried. There's also strange sounds coming from over where the light is, and it's almost like lots of people talking played backwards, really far off, really far, like barely audible, but I could hear it. The forest was pretty quiet at this time, and I think it made it worse. I'm constantly flashing around with my lights, trying to just get whatever this is to show up more, but I can't see anything. Now, I know some people are asking me why wasn't I more scared of that weird thing I'd seen, and to be honest, I can't tell you that. It was almost like I was drawn into something and a mixed personality had taken over where I was seeing weird things and they weren't welcoming, but they weren't worrying for whatever reason, like I had to go on further. I decided that I need to keep up my pace now, but I have some pretty good thoughts and I think, well, I don't want to fall in the water and die, so I go off now. At this part, the trees are a lot thicker than before, and that was a bit more reassuring. But that lake, I'm constantly hearing sounds from over where that lake is, and I just cannot for the life of me figure out what they are. I actually can't remember the sounds too well, and I don't know if it was because I was in a bit of a heightened state during the experience, but I just remembered they were weird sounds, like scratching and things like that. Now I know it could have easily been a group of people on drugs or God knows what, but given the weather conditions, I think that's extremely unlikely. Again, this is something one of my incredible colleagues told me that that's what this could have been, and joking that it was green men and aliens, but I don't understand it, because again, these people are so interested to hear what I was saying, and maybe they're denying it because they're scared of what I'm telling them, or just refused to believe it, but that annoyed me. And I've always been somebody who has the ability to break down the physics of things. If something has happened, I don't immediately go to the irrational explanation. I think with a scientific mind, but it failed me this day, because I can't come up with much for what was happening to me. Now I continue on as the snow gets a little bit thicker now. I think the reason for this might have been because there weren't as many thin trees blocking out all of the snow to capture it. Just quite a few big ones with more space in between, but it did actually make my legs hurt. I noticed my knees are quite cold, so my remedy for this is once again to pick up the pace. I clear some of the snow that's actually settled on me, and I actually feel a bit better now. There's quite a big drop off down to the lake now, and I realise that I'm going uphill. What was weird though is that I haven't been to this area before, and I can't really find it. Even since I've been back to the forest again, I've never been able to find this exact spot. Now, it was like somebody had described the area that I was in to somebody else, and they'd tried to make it but not done it exactly the same. And you kind of know deep down that you're not in exactly the same place, but there's enough familiarity for you to feel confident in the situation. Now, as I get closer to the light that I could see, I realised that this definitely isn't the moonlight, because it was kind of flickering like it had an electrical energy to it, and was kind of flashing around into the clouds a little bit. Not like lightning, but kind of like the northern lights, and that was what I find really bizarre. Just the whole energy of whatever this was is like nothing that I've ever seen before. A little bit scared now, I start to slowly pan around trying to see anything, but I can't find a thing. Every so often I hear sounds of movement behind me, but I can't be sure what this is. I decide that I just need to keep it moving, and that was one of the things that made me feel more safe in this situation now. I eventually come up onto the bend and I start approaching towards where the light is directly now. Now again, I'm not too scared or shy of adventures, so I have to keep pressing forward one step at a time. I do notice something odd, and that's that there aren't any steps up here. I know people might not have gone here in the daytime, but it does seem weird because there was just so many earlier that I'd seen pretty much everywhere. The snow had actually slowed down a little bit, and it wasn't as abrasive on my face, and this was quite nice. My nose and toes always seemed to suffer, especially in the cold, along with my hands. I think I have a problem where they don't have very good blood, or they just seem to switch off in the cold, but it made the going a little bit tough and less comfortable. Now, had I found the ghost that I was looking for? Not just yet. So I decide that I need to go towards the light. But again, the way that the light is kind of bouncing off the clouds, almost like it's the northern lights, was just really strange. I was incredibly drawn into this, almost like I was looking at a hypnotist's watch. It was incredibly beautiful, but just really weird. I didn't know if it was related to an electrical storm, but it wouldn't really make sense for me. I have seen something bizarre while working on the service, so again, a little bit similar to this. I remembered one time that I was working. I was actually in the station and I just made myself a coffee. I went to step outside and had a look around at the sky at night just because it's so beautiful, and I do notice something odd. There's almost like a large blue electrical ball of light in the sky. It's opaque and not really visible, and it only lasted for a few seconds, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A few of my colleagues had actually reported seeing it as well while on duty at the exact same time that I did, and this kind of had the same characteristics, but it wasn't identical. But I want to find out what this is, and I wasn't as scared as I was before. Now, the closer I get, there's something else I notice which is pretty bizarre, and that's that the sky seems to be kind of imitating this very loosely. It's almost like somebody turned on a pulse of electricity through the clouds above me. It's almost like the northern lights are above the whole sky now, but extremely faint, but the same colour as the clouds, so again, it's almost like they were pulsating a bit. I did get scared because there's a eye condition that someone in my family has, which is actually a little bit similar to this, but I've been tested for it multiple times since and after this event, and it's always come up clear. But in the moment, I was pretty scared because I really worry about having issues with my vision. Now, luckily it turned out it wasn't my eyes, and I quickly did some tests by looking at the ground and things that weren't moving to realise that nothing was off. But why was the sky moving? I wasn't so sure what was happening, but I wasn't that far away now from where I needed to be. That's when I noticed another wooden structure. It's similar to what I've seen before, but it kind of formed more of a hexagon type of shape. Every so often I would see these on either sides of the trail, and they seemed to be increasing in frequency as I got closer to the light. I only saw about 3 more of them, but again, never seen it since. I stop for a moment, and I can see my breath on my light as I take my mask down just to try and get a better feel of what was happening. I shine the torch around, but again, I don't see much of anything. Don't know what I was expecting to see. I've just got the glow dead ahead of me now, and I know I have to get there. It's not much longer now before I'm there, so at least I've got that to look forward to, and I can eventually start heading back. I'm not sure how far I'd actually come at this point, but I've probably been walking for about a good 50 or 60 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but usually you'll feel it more than I was in this situation, because walking in the snow is actually really difficult sometimes, and the cold can kind of zap out all of your energy. Now, I'm not too far away from where this is, and I can hear the voices again. It sounds like whispering. I can make out the odd word or two, but nothing seems to be in a language that I understand. It's definitely in a language though, and it hasn't increased in volume or anything since when I first heard it earlier. I don't know if it was there the whole time because I kind of just zoned out to it, but I suddenly noticed it much more than I had done earlier. And again, this is pretty weird to me because, like I said, I've never heard anything like it, and it was a bit creepy. Now, I eventually come up to the last clearing where the light should be, and I'm quite excited to get here. There seems to be lots of footsteps here everywhere, so I'm pretty convinced that I've made it back onto the main path now. I've got a good feeling now, and I know that there must be somebody there, so I feel pretty happy. So, what do? Take my steps around it. I can definitely hear the voices on the right side of me now, and I keep stopping every couple of seconds to approximate exactly where it is. Every so often I see movement up ahead of me, and I'm convinced that it's people out here now, so I feel much more relaxed and reassured. I'm now going down the last straight part that I have to go to, with the trees kind of forming an arch above me, and the snow still everywhere around me. Now, some people have asked me why did I keep going and what was I actually doing out there. That was my friends at work earlier, and I don't know. I guess it kind of felt like I'd been there for too long and I was at least going to get something out of it, and yeah. So, I continue up and I eventually find where the clearing is, and I realise that I've only got about another 20 feet of a walk to figure out what this is, and I can see movement again. I decide that the best thing to do in this situation is just to slowly sneak up on who or whatever it is up ahead of me. Now yes, I've got them, I think. I can see some more lights ahead too. I'd see 2, then 3, then they go out. I don't have my light on at this point because I want the element of surprise. The snow is coming against me, but not directly in my face, so this is pretty pleasant. Now, I come up to where I can hear the voices finally getting louder and louder, and my excitement is growing. It feels like I've been here for too long trying to figure out what is actually going on, and I'm gonna get my taste of it soon. I am kind of looking over my shoulder every so often though, because I do hear sounds like I'm being followed. Again, I keep thinking I'm seeing movement, but there's not much of anything when I focus, so I try not to think of it. I don't actually have my torch on now, so I can't verify the fact that there's nothing there. But again, I just presumed it was people. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me, and I'm not disturbing them, so why are they going to be annoyed at me? It was almost like an overconfidence, and eventually, I come up to the tree line and the clearing. I start going a lot slower now as I get closer and closer to where I can hear them all. Now the chanting is still illegible, and I take my first step up, and I look around and I can see what must be hundreds of people all standing around the edge of some kind of clearing. They've all got their hands raised up and they're making some weird chanting sound. Now they're not actually that close to me, so it's pretty difficult to make out how tall they are, but these things seem really small. I say things because I don't know if they were people unless they were on their knees, but that's what it looked like. I start to shake a little bit as I feel a lot more like I'm in danger now. I decide that I'm gonna slowly turn my flashlight on for a second and figure out what this actually is. My eyes adjust more and more to the darkness every couple of seconds, and I notice something wrong. They don't look like normal people. The shape of them's all wrong and their arms are too long, and they're all either wearing some white things on their arms, but it looks very pointy, just like the things I'd seen earlier. I try as best I can to slowly flicker on the torch, but I cannot do it. Again, I start shaking more and more and try and press it, but nothing happens. I keep on and on flicking until eventually it flashes on, and for a split second I can see these things. They're like very dark small creatures with weird pointy arms, all facing up to the sky making some weird sounds. Their mouths are what really scare me. It's like just a circle with lots of jagged teeth. And just as I'm taking this all in, they suddenly vanish, and so does the sounds. I quickly fire the torch around everywhere trying to see where they've gone, but I can't see anything. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears like a constant rhythmic drum. And then, a few moments later, I hear movement, rustling and the sounds as though hundreds of people are all coming towards me suddenly, and I take off. I turn my torch on and quickly dart up ahead of myself, constantly looking over my shoulder with the torch. What I have just seen, I don't know, but I knew that I was in danger and had to get out of there. Luckily, I can retrace my footprints for most of the journey until I get away from the clearing. I can hear the sounds are still coming after me, just much slower than me, but they're still coming. I stop for a second and fire the torch around everywhere but can't see anything, and I drop it. Now, I managed to drop it not only into the snow, but face first, and that also means there's no light illuminating back at me, it's kind of buried. Just as I say to myself, you've got to be kidding me, I can hear something else not far up ahead of me. So I take off. Thank God I actually brought the other torch with me, because I'm absolutely certain at the fact that I would have had cardiac arrest otherwise. Now, the only problem I've got is the other torch isn't that easily accessible right now. I put it away when I was trying to hide and be not heard, but now I'm starting to think that wasn't really a good idea. And because I've had this on and so close to my face, I haven't really adjusted to the dark, and I don't know where I'm going. I used to be quite good at long distance cross country, so I have that in my favour, but I soon realise those years are way behind me, and I come up to a point where there's two paths. One's much smaller and seems untrodden but should be closer to where I need to get to. The other is what seems to be closer to where the light is, and I have to choose the latter. Now I take off down this path, and I keep fumbling trying to get the other torch on, but for whatever reason I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it was for the fact that it was in the cold for too long, but in those moments it just would not come back to life again, and I'm just hitting it on my palm constantly. Now it's extremely difficult to navigate in this moment. I think I know where I'm going, but I can't really tell. There's clearly lots and lots of different footprints on this path, and I can't tell if they're normal or not because I was rushing so much, but it gives me some reassurance that I must be going in a relatively good direction to escape whatever this is. Now I should mention at this point that the sounds are long gone. I'd absolutely blitzed something that seemed like it couldn't go much quicker than a light walking pace, but it didn't matter. I don't know what was chasing me or why. I don't know what I'd just disturbed. Eventually, I flick my torch on again, and I illuminate the rest of the way back. I turn it off again quickly because I'm not sure how good the battery is and I really needed to conserve it. I stop for a few moments to collect my breath and look around me, and I think I know my bearings now, and I start to walk. The only reason that I had to walk now is because I was so out of breath and exhausted from moving in the snow that I genuinely was going to have to crawl the rest of the way out otherwise. I now make it up to another clearing where I can see the lake. I look around everywhere, and what's really weird, I can't see the light glow that I saw earlier. It's genuinely nowhere. I was convinced that I should still at least be able to see that out of all things, but there's literally nothing. I don't get it. And the sky, it still didn't look right, but it wasn't like before. So where did the light go? I didn't have much time to focus on it, but I was truly perplexed, and this is something that I still think about now. I managed to get my torch on again, and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to recharge whatever energy it was and fire it around everywhere, hoping to see the light again, just to know it was there. But again, I don't see anything. Now, I'm pretty spooked out now, but I have to keep going. I eventually make it into a more familiar area, and I'm actually feeling confident finally. I've adopted more of a walking pace because I was a little bit worried that if anyone was out there and I ran up on them, they might think I was trying to attack them. I do stop constantly though, and look around, desperately trying to see something or anything around me, but again, I can't see anything or anyone. I was desperately hoping that I'd see a group of people just to explain what I'd seen, or at least to be able to tell somebody, but I can't see anything. The snow's picked up a little bit more now, and it wasn't pleasant. I realised too that I must have been out of here for quite a long while because the battery's virtually entirely drained on the torch. I know because it's gone pretty dim. I probably have the worst torch in the world because when the battery's low it goes really dim to conserve it, but it doesn't last very long, so what's the point? The other light that I have is far superior, but that's long gone. I decide to leave it for whatever's out there to enjoy it. I know I'm never seeing that thing again. I'm someone who usually hates losing things too, but I was so scared I didn't even think about trying to recover it. Now, the trees are getting thinner and thinner, and that gives me a pretty good idea that I'm not too far away from where I need to be now. I can't be 100% certain that I'm back to safety, but this is a pretty good indicator of it being the case. Now, I continue this walking pace, and I'm constantly looking behind myself. Now, momentarily, I start shaking again and don't know why. Then suddenly, I realise I hear something making a screeching sound. It's kind of at a medium volume, but it sounds like it's coming from exactly behind where I was. I'm not so worried now because with a few steps, I'm eventually back to where the forest ends and I'm not too far from safety. I look around for anything to have been following me, but I can't see anything. And I quickly make my way over to my car. I start it up, turn the lights on full, and take one last look into the forest, and I can't see anything. I get back into my car and drive the rest of the way home, completely in shock about the whole experience. Now, I really don't know what happened to me that day, and I truly don't like sharing my story with colleagues at work because they don't really listen to me. But I know what I saw, and I don't know what it was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been anything, but I sure as hell don't have a clue what that was, and that scares me. One of the main responsibilities I had working in my national park is to make sure that I survey the climate testing devices. I'm not in the United States of America too, so it might be different out there, but we really put a lot of emphasis on to checking the air quality and trying to maintain it. We try and keep it to the highest possible standard that we can, and it's not really easy, but we have lots of trees, which is really a good thing. Now, on this particular day, I set out to check the first 3 posts and they were fine. I go into the 4th and final one and it's starting to get dark. I can then see that there's a colleague who's already there, so I don't think much of it. I just continue doing my job and do a friendly wave, but I don't get one back. I turn around and go to do my other task, hoping that this person has done it for me, expecting them to catch up with me. I then realise that they look odd. Something about the way that they're standing hunched over just doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't look like somebody who's happy and healthy, it looks like somebody who's a little bit off. I don't know, just their whole demeanour seems really strange to me. I then turn my flashlight over thinking maybe they're in trouble, and I get the fright of my life. I'm met with something that is wearing an all dark robe, has a very weird goat kind of face and looks like what I can only describe as the devil, with completely black eyes. It's probably about 7 feet tall and slowly turns to face me. I drop the flashlight and within a moment I'm bolting the opposite direction. Eventually I make it back to the station and I frantically explain what's happened, and some of the other guys go to check it out. We can't find anything, just my flashlight and its dying light now, because it's been out there in the cold for a while. We don't find a person or devil, but we do find something weird. There are hoof marks in the ground, exactly where I saw this thing. Weirdly, there's none leading away, just perfectly in the position that I saw this thing standing there. We never saw this thing again, but it actually is in our folklore to have things like this around, so I'm certain what I saw was probably the devil or some kind of demonic entity. One day on shift as a park ranger, we had something bizarre happen. We were following a trail and every so often we would find a doll's head. Literally just a decapitated doll's head with the hair half cut, and a scary smiley face etched on with what appeared to be a red pen. This is extremely bizarre. We've never really encountered anything like this, and they seem to be going off in a particular direction. We follow these, and we literally collect about 6 of them, all about 10 feet apart or so, until eventually we find what has to be about 100 or so of them all scattered around in a big circle in the middle of the wilderness. We still to this day have no idea how they got there or what they were there for. Me and a buddy of mine had been called out to go and investigate a tent that was put somewhere it shouldn't have been. You're not supposed to camp in this part of our forest, and There was an old army green tent set up. We're almost there when my buddy stops and says, "Hey, can you hear that?" I say, "What?" I can then very faintly make out the sounds of somebody singing. The more and more I listen to it, it's children singing Ring a Ring of Hoses. It sounds like maybe 4 or 5 of them. They all have different voices. This goes on for about 2 minutes, very faintly. I turn on my flashlight and have a look around in all directions. We cannot locate where the sound is coming from. It sounds like it's right next to us. We turn off the flashlights again and it stops, and we think maybe it's coming from the tent. Quite scared now, we go closer and closer to the tent until somebody emerges. We say, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." He says, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I just needed to rest for a bit," and the guy was actually really nice and said that he didn't realize he wasn't supposed to be. We then ask him, does he know where the singing was coming from? And he looks at us and says no, he was about to ask the same question. He packs up his things and we show him the way back because it's dark. We start to set off and we hear children laughing, just like before. Now the look of fear I've never seen in the other guys before. I must have had the exact same expression as we realise that something is off. We quickly scan the torches around and very quickly scan the area and can't find anything. We then make it hurriedly back to our relative safety. I did some research at the area and apparently there have been reports of similar things happening before. Children laughter in the night, but nobody's ever able to locate where the sound comes from or the accompanied singing. I work as a ranger. I'm not from the United States of America, but I do live in a more deserty place. I remembered one of the most scary things that I ever experienced in my life was that we'd all gone out to somewhere on one particular day and decided to rest. I'd laid down and put my hat over my head, and a gust of wind come and knocked it off me. I rolled over and put the hat on myself again and fell asleep. I wake up to a very loud thud and some screaming sounds. I bolt up like a bolt of lightning, and I look around and my friends all point. I look down and an absolutely huge cactus had come down, literally only about half a feet away from me. If I had not moved to get that hat, then that cactus probably would have killed me, or at least blinded me and did God knows what. This may sound weird too, but I actually had a really weird dream the night before. I dreamt that one of my family members who had passed away long ago had come up to my bed and kept blowing air on my face until I woke up. And when I woke up, it felt like they were there. I'm pretty convinced that they are the reason that my hat moved, and they're the reason that I'm alive today. One of the more stranger things that happened to me while working as a ranger is when I actually had to do camping once. I was actually sent out somewhere to show some guys how to camp and just do general survival training. I didn't really have much of an issue with this. I really enjoyed sharing knowledge and teaching others, so it was a time that I looked forward to. There's supposed to be a group of guys that I was going to have to train, but in the end it turned out only one of them actually showed up. Again, no issues for me. It basically just made my job a lot easier. We had about a week of a planned camping trip that we were going to go and do. Now the area had lots of wild animals in it, but again, because of my background this didn't really bother me much. The other guy that I was taking there with me had some experience too, being in the scouts and things, so he was also used to being outside. The guy was really nice and we get on really well, and we set out in a beautiful area. The paths that we're walking on aren't very good though, to be honest. I guess you can call them paths, but they're kind of more like clearings. I didn't have an issue with this, but I am constantly checking with the other guy if he's okay, because I don't want him to get an injury here. I'm quite a big guy, but I'm not going to be able to carry this guy if he gets hurt or anything. So, completely aware of this, we decide to be very careful. Now, we got through the first day with no issues at all, and everything's going pretty well, to be honest. We both felt really good, and I actually taught this guy a lot. We got on really well, and it turns out that he actually went to school quite close to where I used to. Crazy how small the world is out here. I don't know, things like that always seem to amaze me, especially when you don't expect it. So anyway, we continue and we're doing some hunting the next day. We ended up finding a really nice white water rapid, not really rapid, but I guess a strong stream next to us, and we decided to try and catch some fish in here. There's some that end up getting caught in little pools of rocks and things, and we ended up finding one, which was pretty cool. We decided to head back and put these on the fire that we started. We actually had some issues getting the fire started, and I told this guy that you have to bury the food after, and just some other basic things. He said sure, and everything is normal. We get on to the next day, and everything seems a little bit odd. I don't know how to describe it, but it was almost like there was something in the air, which was ever so different from what we had felt the first couple of days. I mean, the first few days felt really peaceful, and we were really happy out there, but something just felt different now. I couldn't describe it. The guy would also act a little bit more weird now. I could clearly tell that he was paranoid, but I don't know, some things just weren't making sense to me. The way that he would speak to me, I mean, he would start saying something, then would just stop. He was telling me that he had lots of aspirations to work in the forest like I did, and to really have a long career like me. And I said that was cool, but then he would say something out of the blue, like he'd say, oh, the colour red, or something weird like that. He kind of laughed it off a few times, but I didn't like it. I don't know how to describe it. It made me very on edge. I was constantly trying to keep at least a little bit of distance between us and just scope out what was wrong. I thought, yeah, maybe the guy wasn't cut out to be here. Not everybody is. Some people have real issues with this psychologically, and maybe he's just panicking through it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And we continue onwards like normal. Now, eventually, we fall asleep in the tent, and I'm awoken by the sound of sniffing or something. I can't figure out what it is. I go to wake up the other dude. I say, hey, Ben, are you there? Ben. And I don't get a reply. I then realise that he's outside somewhere. I think that's quite odd. I can see the silhouette of somebody, and I get up to investigate and say, Ben, what are you doing? I grab my flashlight, and I can't find him anywhere. I also can't figure out who's around. I say, Ben, come back, what are you doing? And then I start to panic a little bit. It's like this guy just vanished, but the really weird thing is that I saw somebody going around our tent. I say our, but I now realise that I'm the only one in it. I think this is really odd, and I start to panic. I ended up calming myself down a little bit, and then I can see a group of people. They all seem to be sitting around a fire. I think that's really odd. There's probably about 8 or so of them, and then I can see Ben next to them. I shine the torch on and say, hey, you guys, what are you doing? We're meant to be asleep, who are you? And I don't get a reply. I then turn the light off and jog over, and then only Ben's remaining. I say, Ben, what's wrong? And he says, God. And he suddenly snaps out of some kind of trance or something. Looking really confused and sleep deprived, he said, what am I doing? Why am I here? I say, what's wrong? Where are the people? He said, what people? And looks really confusedly at me. I say, you know, the people around us, and I shine my torch around trying to find them, but literally everybody's gone. Ben is absolutely adamant that nobody else has been around him. I then take his hand and say, come on, we're getting back to the tent. And we go back to the tent, and he falls asleep almost exhaustedly. I didn't get asleep one bit that night. I woke up the following day and constantly questioned him on what had happened, but he has absolutely zero recollection of it. We eventually go on for the rest of the trip, but we cannot find out who those people were, or why they led him out there, or where on earth they went to. It's something that still haunts me to this day. My husband and I went camping in eastern Pennsylvania. The place we decided to stop is really primitive. Camping was free, no cell services, and barely any roads. We did encounter 2 other people. They might not be a factor in what happened after all, but I'll describe them. The first was a woman who had her truck off to the side of the road a little way as we drove past it. She had the hood open and seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer help. Usually my boyfriend had no problem helping someone, but he said something's off about her. She didn't really seem like she needed help, and usually people who need help look at you hopefully as you approach. She looked as though she expected us to stop. That's what my boyfriend said anyway, and I didn't really notice anything about it, which was strange. Now this was my boyfriend at the time, now husband, to put that into context. The next person came when we had chosen a spot and we were setting up a fire for hot dogs. I had noticed people drive by a few times, but my boyfriend pointed out each time it's the same car, and the man in the car watched us each time he passes. My boyfriend felt a little uneasy about this, but we had driven around for a while before finding a place that we liked. It had been raining and everything was muddy, and we wanted to go to the driest site possible. He could have been doing the same thing. We actually briefly thought about moving because the road is too muddy. Now if he wanted us all he has to do is follow the tracks. There were some other tracks, but not many. He'd only have backtracked a little to relocate us again. He didn't come by another time, so we stayed and spent the several remaining hours before dark goofing off. No one else drove by. Whether or not those 2 actually had anything else to do with our experience, I don't know. But the real fear came later. We had gone to sleep in our tent, and sometime around 3 AM, we were woken by a very loud noise. I can't describe it very well, or even remember exactly what it sounded like, but my boyfriend said it reminded him of a chain gun revving up. It was also similar to how it would sound if somebody recorded a shovel being dragged over gravel and played over a speaker. He jumped up and looks out the little window but can't see anything. The sound repeats itself a few more times. I was too scared to speak, so my boyfriend whispers that it's probably miles off and that I should go back to sleep. I didn't question this, as I figured loud sounds could easily be heard miles off. After we left, he told me it sounded like it had actually become something that was just down the road, and he didn't want me to freak out. Looking back, I probably should have wondered why he would bother to whisper if apparently the sound was off. I was terrified. Every little thing I heard outside sounded like somebody was walking around the tent. We laid there for a while longer, and when finally my boyfriend told me to get dressed because we're leaving, I get alarmed. And even more alarmed when he unwraps the machete we bought just for this trip. Now, we quickly packed up and loaded the car. I looked around for boot prints, but there weren't any other than our own. Despite the moon providing plenty of light, I couldn't really see. I did point out something to my boyfriend that he hadn't noticed, so there was a beer can by our dead fire that wasn't there before. We didn't even bring beer. While we were driving away, my boyfriend explained that he was nervous somebody might have been trying to lure us out, so he didn't think it was a good idea for us to run from the tent right away. He also half expected to find out that the gas tank had been siphoned out, but that wouldn't have stopped us because we had a hybrid car. We actually joked it'd make a good hybrid car commercial. Now the rest of our trip we only stayed in well-populated campsites or a hostel.